welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, a podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we are going to talk about Star Wars Skeleton Crew. I will just start off by saying this was not on my list. I was not intending to watch this. I was not intending to review it. I got a couple of requests online of people wanting to know what my thoughts were on this one or wanting to know if I was going to cover it in an episode. And because it's been fairly slow in terms of movies and new shows, I figured I would give it a go. I've watched the first 2 episodes. I do have some thoughts. I am going to cover this kind of from 2 different perspectives. My own sort of personal thoughts on the show as an adult and my view as what the show I think is intended to be is something fun for kids. Because I have thoughts that are a little bit different depending on how you're looking at it. So to jump into Skeleton Crew, I think if you are a parent, which I know a lot of people that listen to my podcast are roughly the same age as me and probably have some younger kids. I think if your kids are under the age of 12 and you are looking to get them into something that is Star Wars adjacent, I think that this is probably going to be geared for them. It's going to be right up their alley. I've heard quite a bit of talk on the internet that this is just kind of a ripoff or a little bit like Goonies in space. And I would say so far, I do think that that is fairly accurate. It's been a while since I've seen the Goonies, but definitely while I was watching this, it was giving me like Power Rangers vibes, like the show that was out in the 90s that I used to watch. And it was awful. It was terrible. I would never watch it as an adult, but as a kid, I forking loved it. You could not pry me from the television for that. So I think that potentially Skeleton Crew has that going for it. It is a younger set of kids who are like the main protagonists. I did also kind of see myself comparing this one a bit to Stranger Things, but for different reasons. I think that Stranger Things obviously is incredibly superior in terms of story writing to Skeleton Crew, but I found myself sort of thinking that potentially they should have done something sort of similar to Stranger Things in terms of how this was written if they wanted to go a wider audience. Like, I think that Jude Law is here specifically to try and draw in the adults. I don't think that he is utilized particularly well, at least not from the perspective of only seeing the first 2 episodes. But if you look at something like Stranger Things, how they have the group of younger kids, the group of teen kids, and the group of adults, all with their own storylines and all written exceptionally well. I think the downside is that I don't think that Lucasfilm or Star Wars or Disney has any good writers anymore. That is just my opinion. Like, their Star Wars stuff has been consistently poorly written. So that is the same here. I do not think that Skeleton Crew is written very well, but I do also think that it is 100% geared towards children. So I don't know how well a story needs to be written for a silly child film. Does that make sense? Or child television series. So from that perspective, I would say if you do have little kids, it is potential that they will really enjoy this. So far, in the first 2 episodes, I would say that there is not a whole heck of a lot going on in terms of story progression. Nothing really has happened in the first 2 episodes that have hooked me personally into this show in any way, shape, or form. That's why I'm saying I wish that they had kind of gone a little bit more the Stranger Things route and given a few different ranges of ages and characters so that there's something for, let's say, the adults to grapple onto if they're watching this with their kids and for the kids to grapple onto while they are watching it. I think that this one really only has the child aspect of it going for a pretty good amount of time. Like, we have a very short blip of kind of quote unquote adult characters at the beginning of the first episode. You see a little bit of some parents happening, but not frequent enough for it to be like a character that you will ever see really going on in the show. And then you don't really get introduced to Jude Law's character sort of until the end of the second episode. So you really are following sort of silly kid stuff for the bulk of those first 2 episodes, which for me as, you know, a 40-year-old adult is not compelling in any way, shape, or form. So to move on into like my own personal thoughts on Skeleton Crew, I think that this show is really bad. And I say that just saying that I am not the intended audience. I know I'm not the intended audience for this show. It's not something that I find appealing in any way, shape, or form. Struggling through the first 2 episodes, I will say that. I am sort of interested. I mean, I think that Jude Law really is the only thing that was compelling at all to me in this show. I very much enjoy Jude Law. His character so far in this show does not make sense. Like, the way that it is written does not make sense. I think that the acting in this is also very poor. Again, though, they're child actors. I'm not expecting them to be, Broadway amazing, actors at this age. I just don't think that that's possible. However, I also just think that it's written so poorly that a really great child actor probably would not be doing very well in this show either, if that makes sense. But the show itself, like, there just is nothing, there is no meat and potatoes to this show at this juncture. Again, it's just the first 2 episodes, but to me, the first 2 episodes should be the strongest. I am not sure, or I can't really say whether the first 2 episodes would be compelling to a child, because I can't approach it from that aspect. But as an adult, there is nothing to this show in any way, shape, or form. Like, there's nothing happening. There's nothing going on. Like, yes, there is things happening. Like, the kids find the ship. They go to sort of the pirate sort of staging area. I don't know what else to call it. It essentially would be like Pirate Island, I guess, but in space. And then that's where they discover Jude Law's character. And that's where really the treasure hunt, quote unquote, for this particular planet is going to ensue. To me, it's very generic. There's nothing very compelling about what they've written here. There's nothing compelling about any of the characters that they've written here. I'm not interested, let's say, in any of the characters from this the way that I would be interested in some of the kid characters from Stranger Things, like Will's character being trapped in the Upside Down and how that is affecting him, or Eleven's character and her, strange upbringing and her weird powers and how that is compelling, or any of the teenagers, and kind of what they're going through. Like, none of that is present here. It's just silly kids being silly kids. Like, there isn't any depth to the writing in Skeleton Crew in the way that some other shows that maybe are geared for adults and for younger kids might be. And I push that a little bit. I'm not sure that Stranger Things is something that necessarily you'd watch with younger kids. It is a bit more dark. Whereas I think that Skeleton Crew, though it has some dark moments, I think is really more so just a silly sort of campy children's show. It's not something that I am interested in. I probably will not continue to watch it unless I hear something amazing. For instance, I wasn't necessarily all that into Ahsoka when I heard they did sort of that flashback of the Clone Wars episode in episode 5, I think. I did go back to watch that. I'm a Hayden Christensen fan, so of course I'm going to. But other than that, I don't really see myself coming back to Skeleton Crew other than to maybe watch one episode if somebody says it's a particularly amazing episode. This show to me is just, it's meant for kids. It's not meant for me. I'm not the target audience. It doesn't feel in any way, shape, or form like Star Wars to me. I think you could take Star Wars completely off of the front and put in like Rebel Moon, Skeleton Crew, and it would be exactly the same. It's a very generic sci-fi. It doesn't even feel that particularly original. Again, like I said, it feels very much like The Goonies or like any of those sort of kids go on an adventure shows that were around in like the 80s and 90s. It feels very much like that. So it doesn't even feel like it has its own originality. It is original maybe in the aspect that it's original to Star Wars, that we haven't seen something like this in Star Wars before. But in terms of the show itself, it's not original. It's not a new thought that's happening. It's just a new aspect of something that already exists, if that makes sense. So Star Wars Skeleton Crew is, to me, it's not a win in any way, shape, or form. You're going to have to decide whether or not it's a win for you and your kids, if that's what you are going to be watching with. So those are my thoughts on Skeleton Crew. I would love to know what you guys thought if you have watched this one. Subscribe to join the Movie Nerd family, and I hope to see you in the next episode.